Hello everybody, and thanks for tuning in for this special edition video all about the history of the Mercury Comet Cyclone. Sit back and hear how and why these cars were developed and how they evolved to meet market changes from year to year during the exciting and highly competitive muscle car era. Unlike 1962 and 63, when the Comet series was marketed in two distinct series, the Falcon-based Comet and the Fairlane-based Meteor, the newly designed 64 Comets would all be sold within one size on a 114-inch chassis. They were still based on the highly successful Ford Falcon platform, just as the Mustang would be. Ford Motor Company knew there was a good-sized market for not only performance cars, but also for personalized models, which may or may not have high-performance traits. The 1964 Comets turned out to be excellent sellers for Ford. One of the main reasons that so many people bought them was because of Mercury's assault on the Daytona Motor Speedway, where 5 specially prepared Caliente hardtops participated in the Comet Durability Run, where Mercury set out to prove that their newest model was indeed a reliable car. To make it as legitimate as possible for new records in the eyes of the public, the entire run was completed under the watchful eyes of representatives of several highly respected sanctioning bodies. All told, it took about 100 people at the track for the run's entire duration to accomplish this goal. It began on September 21, 1963 and ended on October 30th, through all sorts of weather. Drivers were changed every 2 hours at the allowed pit stops where routine maintenance was also performed. Every Cyclone 289 high-performance solid-lifter small block V8 was carefully assembled, while the manual 4-speed Borg-Warner gearboxes were hand-assembled as well. Out back, a heavy-duty 9-inch rear axle completed the bulletproof drivetrain. Suspensions and brakes were fortified with heavy-duty components, and also safety equipment like heavy-duty wheels, racing tires, and full roll bars were also added. Additional instrumentation included a tachometer and oil temperature and fuel pressure gauges. Two-way radios were used by each driver for communication. The worst mechanical failure was a broken valve spring on one of the cars that put it out of record contention. Nevertheless, it was quickly repaired and still managed to complete the challenge. 4 cars went the required 100,000 miles in over 960 hours. 3 of these Calientes broke or established over 100 world speed and distance records. A 5th Comet was there to break a record and average 124.421 miles for 10,000 miles. Another durability run was conducted called the East African Safari Rally. It was an annual race through Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, and was considered the most unforgiving race course in the world. Lincoln Mercury Division entered 5 Calientes in the 3,000-plus miles race, and there were 91 cars from many different world manufacturers that also started the race. Only 21 finished, among them 2 Comets, but they placed 18th and 21st. This was the only year that Mercury would participate. Ford had developed the highly potent Thunderbolt drag car. It was a 1964 Fairlane 500 two-door sedan with a 427 high-riser engine, backed by either a 4-speed or an automatic. Mercury had Dearborn steel tubing construct a few cars. All were hardtops and ran quite successfully in the AFX class. Later, Dyno Don Nicholson ran a station wagon equipped the same way. It was a legend. All these race and endurance efforts paid off. The car-buying public responded enthusiastically by visiting their local dealers and purchasing an astounding 189,936 Comets, comprised of 15 different models. The Caliente was the newest model for those wanting a sporty hardtop. The performance-oriented Cyclone debuted about midway through the year on January 17, 1964. This option was loaded with desirable standard features like a Cyclone Super 289 4-barrel engine with single exhaust, complete with a chrome dress-up package accentuating the black engine, a 3-speed manual transmission, bucket seats, a center console, unique door panels, an instrument cluster finished in a black camera case finish, a simulated wood grain sport steering wheel, a 6,000 RPM tachometer that looked like the Falcon Sprints, special 14-inch wheel covers with chrome lug nuts that looked like chrome reverse wheels, and special ornamentation on the front fenders. A long list of options ensured that a Cyclone could be ordered to suit every buyer. One curious thing that is, to this day, not fully understood is that the 64 Comet line used the engine code K in the VIN's fifth digit to designate the low-compression 289 four-barrel engine that was identical to the 64.5 Mustang's D code 289. It was rated at 210 horsepower. In the same year Ford Fairlane, the K VIN represented the solid lifter 289 high-performance mill. Usually all Ford divisions shared similar codes. Why the Comets did not use the D code is up for speculation. This causes much confusion today for the uninformed. Many ads have been placed for cars for sale with a K code as a high-performance 289 model. 1965 started out as a very competitive year for all the American manufacturers because cars like the Ford Mustang, the Chevrolet Supersport models, the Pontiac GTO, the Oldsmobile 442, and the Plymouth Barracuda S all competed for needed sales from the now huge baby boomer market. All these cars, plus many others, could be ordered any way a buyer wanted, as a personalized sporty car, a well-optioned luxury car, or as an all-out muscle car. Sales were exploding, and Mercury's compact entrant into this market was quite successful too. Because the Comet durability run in '64 was such a success, Mercury had another idea for a durability run, but one that would be much more challenging. How about attempting to drive 3 specially prepped Comet Caliente hardtops non-stop for 40 days and nights through 14 countries, starting in Argentina and ending in Alaska. Starting in Ushuaia, Argentina, this route offered all challengers extreme weather conditions and the unpredictability of international roads. On September 12, 1964, a team of drivers, mechanics, and official timers all sped northward through hostile environs of mountains, deserts, and jungles. The 3 entrants were modified regular production Comet Caliente hardtops. Their assigned mission was anything but routine. They wanted to prove once again to the public that Comet is the world's durability champion. After a grueling journey of exactly 16,247 miles, all 3 cars finished the run and no repairs other than routine maintenance were needed. The entourage of Calientes arrived in Fairbanks, Alaska on October 22, 1964. The entire trek was documented with many photos and daily accounts of what they experienced. Following up on their successful drag racing program using the Comet, several 64s were rebodied to 65s, and a new class was developed known as BFX, where 289 engines powered the cars, many using exotic induction. Some drag teams wanted to experiment with blowers and altered wheelbases, which eventually led to the development of the funny car. It was quite a time if you were a drag racing enthusiast. The Comet lineup consisted of 15 different models. All still rode on a 114-inch wheelbase. This would be the last year that they were based on the Falcon platform. An impressive production total of 165,052 Comets was reached by year's end. Standard Cyclone features included a 225 horsepower Cyclone Super 289 4-barrel with single exhaust, a chrome dress-up package on a black painted engine, a 3-speed manual transmission, a distinctively styled grille, additional rear panel ornamentation with a special name badge, a 6,000 RPM tachometer, which was different than in 1964, a black camera case finish on the instrument cluster, a sporty simulated wood steering wheel, bucket seats, a console, special door panels, special quarter panel ornamentation, and the same wheel covers as in '64. As expected, many options were available. Incidentally, 1965 was the first year for Ford's revolutionary reversible keys. Finally, a few 289 high-performance engines found their way between the shock towers of a Comet, but evidently Ford did not assign a different VIN code for these. They can only be confirmed by a build sheet or window sticker. 1966. This would be a big year for Ford with the introduction of the completely new intermediate models, including the Cyclone. Now available for the first time as a convertible, in addition to the 2-door hardtop, These cars came in two distinct series, Cyclone and Cyclone GT. Ford engineers were finally able to design a completely new car with a 2-inch larger wheelbase over the previous models, so they would be able to easily accept the newest version of the reliable 390 engine. The GT version was now outfitted with performance goodies like a Holley carburetor, topped by a chrome open element air cleaner that was part of the dress-up package. A heavy-duty cooling system with a clutch fan and streamlined exhaust manifolds and a dual exhaust were all standard as part of the GT package. This Hypo 390 produced 335 ponies. This engine was only available in the Cyclone GT and the Fairlane GT models for this year. Now, all Ford-built engines would be painted Ford blue, although the 3-speed manual was the standard transmission. The big news at Ford would be the new C6 3-speed automatic that could be shifted manually or simply left in drive. Between the Cyclone GT and the Fairlane GT, many buyers opted for this new gearbox. Interestingly, the Fairlane was called GTA, while Cyclones were simply called GT. The manual 4-speed was no longer made by Warner Gear, but was now a Ford-built unit known as the top loader. Where the Cyclone really excelled was in the looks department. Inside, these cars were equipped with bucket seats, a console, distinctive door panels, a black camera case finish on the gauge cluster, and a sporty simulated wood steering wheel with a beautiful chrome horn ring. The sides of the car were adorned with dual upper pinstripe and rocker moldings. The grille had black highlights, as did the rear trim panel between the tail lamps. Special fender ornamentation was used as well. It's often thought that the Cyclone came with a dual-scooped fiberglass hood as part of the package, just like the GT, but it was in fact a popular option. The GT interiors had all the same features as the Cyclone. Early model GTs were standard with a tachometer borrowed from the 65, and early cars also came with chrome valve covers that had die-cast nameplates affixed to it that read 390 Cyclone GT. They often leaked because of how the nameplate was affixed to the valve cover. Both features were discontinued soon after the model's introduction. On the exterior, Mercury wanted every onlooker to know this car was special. The grille, rear panel trim, upper body pinstripes, and the wheel covers were all borrowed from the lesser Cyclone, while racing tape stripes above the rocker panels replaced the moldings. Special ornamentation on the front fenders and an aggressive-looking, non-functional dual-scoop fiberglass hood completed the package. Underneath, all cars had the heavy-duty suspension with upgraded springs, shocks, and a larger front sway bar. The new GT convertible was selected to pace the most famous race in the world, the Indianapolis 500. It was the 50th annual race, and the pace car was driven by Henry Ford II's brother, Benson Ford, with track owner Tony Hulman and NASA astronaut Gus Grissom accompanying him. It is believed that a total of 33 specially prepared cars were used by track officials and dignitaries prior to and on the day of the race. They were all drilled for special bracketry to display flags. It's also believed that an additional 100 cars were sold as replicas to commemorate the event. All were candy apple red with white graphics, styled steel wheels without center caps, and parchment interiors, and were assembled in the early spring of 1966 in Lorain, Ohio. Dealerships and toy sellers had been distributing mostly 1/25th scale promotional cars every new model year in factory colors for many years, and the new Cyclone GT was no exception. Early promos were hardtops only and came in several colors. When the Cyclone GT was announced as the pace car, two color combinations, white with red decals and red with white decals in the hardtop body style, were used as giveaways to promote Mercury's selection for this prestigious event. Drag racers continued to develop their cars, and Dino Don and Jack Christman led the way with the assistance of the Logie family, who built specialized chassis. These newest funny cars had fiberglass flip-up bodies, a tube chassis, 1,000 plus horsepower engines, and more. They could break the quarter mile in less than 8 seconds. Total Comet sales were divided amongst 15 models for a total of 170,426 cars, still lagging behind the record number of cars sold in 1964. A noteworthy achievement was reached during the model year when the 1 millionth Comet was produced. It was a Caliente four-door sedan. 1967 was the second year of the styling cycle of the Mercury Comet, so only a few minor cosmetic changes were ordered, and a shuffling of standard and optional features were instituted as well. This year saw the federal government mandating seatbelts for all passengers, the introduction of dual reservoir brake master cylinders, reverse lights, column-mounted four-way emergency flashers, a breakaway inside rearview mirror, and a collapsible steering column and wheel. Finally, the dash pad, visors, armrests, and windshield pillar pads were all made of softer materials. Big news in the Comet line was the availability of the NASCAR-inspired 427 engine. Mercury was really beginning to offer performance in their Cougar and Cyclone lines, so their ad slogan this year was Mercury, the man's car. It was quite effective at bringing male buyers into showrooms to buy a performance Mercury. It was soon realized, though, that many car purchasing decisions were influenced or made directly by women, so it was phased out at the end of 1969. Can you imagine that slogan being used in today's politically correct culture? It would never happen. Let's talk about the Cyclone. For the first time, these models were not badged with any Comet insignias. They would now be known as the Mercury Cyclone. As in 1966, the standard engine was the 289, still rated at 200 horsepower. It was still backed by the 3-speed manual, and as part of the package, many of the features seen the previous year were back again. Bucket seats, special door panels, a black camera case finish around the instrumentation, and a wood grain steering wheel with a special horn ring are immediately noticed inside. The console was no longer standard. On the exterior, a new grille that differs slightly from the standard Mercury Comet handsomely adorns the car's front. New ornamentation is seen, and rocker panel moldings and accent pinstriping also returned from 1966. The GT hood was still only available from the options list. For the performance enthusiast, the Cyclone was one of 4 series that could be had with either legendary 427 engine. The 427 4-barrel and the 427 8-barrel. With this engine, the manual 4-speed was mandatory. Just a few were ever built. The GT model still retained the base 390 high-performance engine, now rated at 320 horsepower. Its Ford cousin, the Fairlane GT, was now sporting the 289 2-barrel engine as standard. It would now be known as the Marauder V8. It was essentially the same engine as in 1966, but the power rating was likely downgraded for insurance purposes. Still featuring a heavy-duty cooling and chrome dress-up package, the air cleaner and valve covers differed from their 1966 counterparts. This year, all valve covers, no matter the engine size, proclaimed the famous Power by Ford slogan. Again, the heavy-duty 3-speed manual was the standard transmission, although very few buyers were satisfied with this gearbox in a high-performance automobile. When seeing either of these two body styles, a few things were immediately obvious. The same grille and some of the same ornamentation seen on the Cyclone was found on the GT. This year, the rocker panel stripes, now known as rally stripes, had the GT emblems on the front fenders within the stripes. As in '66, no matter the transmission, all were simply identified as such. However, in the Ford Fairlane and now the Mustang, automatic cars were designated GTA. The macho-looking standard fiberglass hood was back, as were the wheel covers that were now mounted on half-inch wider 14-inch wheels. Inside, the same features found in the Cyclone were seen in the GT. By this year, the competition between all the manufacturers in this segment of the market was fierce, so the low production numbers on the GT are not surprising. Total Comet sales for 14 models was 81,133, a dismal drop from 1966. 1968. The Mercury Intermediates got a complete facelift this year, but were essentially using many earlier components under the skin. Still measuring 116 inches for the wheelbase, these new cars were strikingly beautiful. The most obvious design change, after the two basic body styles, is the lack of vent windows on the two-door models. This year, all cars were classified as Montego models, except for the entry-level basic Comet. Again, 2 models were available, the Cyclone and the Cyclone GT. The Cyclone could be ordered in the hardtop and the fastback body styles, with bench or bucket seats, all listed as separate data plate codes, while the GT was available in both body styles, but bucket seats were standard. The convertibles were no longer available in this series, but could be ordered as a Montego MX. Production on these cars was disappointing. A total of 17 models saw production totals of 123,113 by year's end. As in years past, there were many options that could be ordered for appearance, comfort, convenience, performance, and safety. Let's look at the Cyclone. The standard engine was the 302 two-barrel, posting a rating of 210 horsepower. There were several engines that were optional, including a 302 four-barrel with dual exhaust rated at 230 horses, a 390 two-barrel single exhaust at 265, a 390 GT S-Code engine that delivered 320 horsepower now, and possibly the 427 four-barrel that now had a hydraulic camshaft and a C6 transmission. There was no 4-speed available with this engine. Although this option is depicted in all of the typical sales literature of the time, it's uncertain if any were put in Mercury's other than the Cougar GTE this year. Finally, the now legendary 428 Cobra Jet debuted on April 1st of '68. Because it was a late introduction and most catalogs didn't show it as available, only a handful of these cars were ever built. All engines got emblems with their respective displacements prominently shown on the front fenders right above the rally stripes. External styling cues for the Cyclone included a special grille with black accents, a single upper pinstripe that ran the entire length of each side of the car, and the lower body above the rocker panels also had the rally stripes placed there. An entirely redesigned back end on either model was obvious when compared to the 67s. The fastback featured a large die-cast chrome trim piece that read Mercury in large block letters from tail lamp to tail lamp. Because the angle of the rear glass would bring unwanted heat into the passenger compartment, tinted rear windows were standard for all these fastback cars. Model identification nameplates were seen on both bodies on the rear quarter panels. Inside, these cars had special door panels and all vinyl bench seats, although buckets were optional. A deluxe wood grain steering wheel, which was a Cyclone trademark since 1964, was present as expected, but the gauge cluster and the entire dash was now dominated by full wood grain paneling that looked more European luxury than American muscle. Finally, deluxe hubcaps were now standard, but many buyers preferred the new design 14-inch styled wheels that were available. They all used trim rings and caps, emblazoned with the Mercury Man's head. The Cyclone GT had all the above features except that they were equipped with heavy-duty suspension, power front disc brakes, and performance F7014 tires. Inside, the standard bucket seats were upholstered in a breathable vinyl called Comfort Weave, and according to some sales catalogs I've seen, thicker carpeting. Additional features were courtesy of the U.S. government. New emissions equipment for all the states, not just California, were first seen, and additional safety features were added, specifically side marker lights at all 4 external corners on all cars and light trucks that year, and incorporating shoulder belts for front seat passengers on all cars built after January 1st, 1968. 1969. This would prove to be a banner year for all American muscle cars, but there were now more entries than ever available to anyone that wanted a performance car. The Cyclone series was no different. The hardtop coupe body style, seen last year, was no longer on the option list as a Cyclone, but could be ordered as a Comet, a Montego, or a Montego MX, and could theoretically be equipped with all the options to outfit the car like a Cyclone. Putting a much bigger emphasis on performance, Mercury issued a special advertising brochure called Street Scene, a combination of street and strip. The brochure also featured Coca-Cola as a co-sponsor, and their mention can be seen throughout. There were 6 different Cyclone models that could be bought at any Mercury dealer nationwide. Now called the Sports Roof, a buyer could order a Cyclone with either bench or bucket seats. As was the case in 1968, the rear glass was tinted on all of these Sports Roof cars. Let's give you a quick review of each model. First, the Cyclone. Standard engine was a 302 two-barrel rated at 220 horses and a 3-speed manual transmission. They all had wheel lip and rocker panel moldings, and there were dual sport stripes from front to rear. The grille was blacked out and had Cyclone identification in its center. All had the same rear panel trim as seen the previous year. Inside, special door panels and an all-vinyl bench seat was also standard, but a popular special package called the Cyclone GT Optional Appearance Group included special turbine-style wheel covers, a body-colored left-hand racing mirror, a new for '69 wood grain steering wheel where the horn was activated by squeezing the rim, also known as rim blow, a comfort weave knitted vinyl on bucket seats. Of course, many other options were available. Next in the hierarchy of models is the Cyclone Sports Special, also known and identified as the Cyclone Spoiler. These cars all had 351 4-barrel Windsor engines rated at 290 horsepower and backed by a column-shifted FMX automatic as standard fare. The interiors were essentially like the Cyclones, and color-keyed dual sport mirrors were also there. These cars were only available as either a Dan Gurney Special, which was a white car with a presidential blue top and rear deck along with the matching sport stripes, or as a Cale Yarborough Special which substituted the blue for candy apple red. All cars also had a blacked out grille and matte black rear deck mounted spoilers above the well-known special rear die-cast nameplate. They were tributes to the success of two specific drivers who did very well for Ford over the years, particularly in 1968. They all had color-matched all-vinyl interiors. All standard options were available. To homologate a car to run at NASCAR, rules specified at least 500 cars were to be built, and they be available to the general public. This is why the modified Sports Special Cyclone Spoiler 2 was built. Modifications included lowering, rolling the rocker panels under, extending the front end by over a foot, mounting a flush-fitting Fairlane die-cast black grille sealed with a full rubber gasket to ensure no wind got by it, and additionally, Ford truck park lamps were positioned behind it, and a modified front bumper that began life as a Fairlane rear bumper was seen. It was only available in the two different color schemes just mentioned, along with the sports stripes. There were 503 cars built by year's end. Over at Ford, the Talladega was also developed for NASCAR duty. Surprisingly, their drivetrain was upgraded from the Spoiler 2s with the non-Ram Air 428 Cobra Jet and the C6 automatic. They were available in Presidential Blue, Royal Maroon, and Wimbledon White, and all featured black cloth and vinyl interiors, in contrast to the 2's all-vinyl interior. Most of the body mods were the same between the two Aero Warriors. Ford sold 754 cars, and they, along with their Mercury cousins, dominated NASCAR for several years before they were banned. Essentially, no options were available for either model. Finally, the big boy in the Cyclone line was the CJ428 model. This was Mercury's model into the entry-level muscle car market to compete with the likes of the Chevelle SS396, the Dodge Super Bee, the Plymouth Roadrunner, and Ford's Fairlane Cobra. As the name says, a 428 Cobra Jet was the base engine under the scooped and pinned hood. It had heavy-duty cooling too. The top loader was the standard gearbox that sent the 335 ponies to a 9-inch axle equipped with traction lock and 350 gears. If the car was optioned with a drag pack, it became a Super Cobra Jet, but Ram Air was still optional. The internals were strengthened by using 427-style heavy-duty rods and rod bolts, as well as an external oil cooler, in either 391 or 430 rear axle gears. The carburetor and the camshaft was still the same one used on the non-SCJ. Curiously, there was no increase in rated horsepower. On the exterior, a blacked-out grille, sports stripes, dual-body painted racing mirrors, and special decal identification on the front fenders and rear quarter panels immediately caught your eye. Raised white letter F7014 tires gave the car a more aggressive look than it already had. Inside, regular Cyclone door panels and an all-vinyl bench seat positioned the front seat passengers directly in front of the simulated wood dash in all available colors. The Cyclone, the Cyclone CJ, the Cyclone Spoiler, and the Cyclone Spoiler 2 all had standard bench seats and had a data plate code of 63A. Therefore, exact production numbers of each cannot be definitively confirmed. Unless a Marty report is ordered, there is no further breakdown on this body code. Bucket seat models were comprised of the 63C Cyclone and the 63H Cyclone CJ428. The entire Montego lineup was comprised of 15 models, and a very respectable 117,421 cars were delivered by year's end. When Ford fundamentally changed the bodies and engine availability on their 1970 mid-sized offerings, both the Montego and the Torino seemed completely different than their 1969 counterparts. Not surprisingly, both divisions' muscle car offerings for this market segment were still plentiful and wide-ranging. New this year was a rear axle mounted stabilizer bar in addition to a front one, in a package called the Cross Country Ride Special. This new bar greatly improved these cars' road manners. Certain sales literature still referred to it as competition suspension, heavy-duty suspension, or sports suspension. They were all the same. Since the focus here is the 1970 Cyclone models, let's go over what standard features were found in each model. This would be the first year that the government mandated each manufacturer use data labels with an adhesive backing rather than metal data plates. First was the Cyclone. It was a pretty basic muscle car. Like the Torino Cobra, it featured the 429 Thunderjet engine with dual exhaust, putting out 360 horsepower. The Hurst-shifted 4-speed manual top loader transferred the power to an open Ford 9-inch rear axle. Underneath, the cross-country suspension was also standard. These entry-level muscle cars also used 14 by 6-inch wheels and the latest in performance tire technology. Dual racing mirrors were painted body color. Up front, special running lights were integral to the handsome new grille. Like other basic performance cars of the era, a long list of options could be ordered for these Cyclones to truly personalize the car for its new owner. All three Cyclone models, unlike their Montego cousins, were now equipped with what was called high-level ventilation. Next was the Cyclone GT, a 351 two-barrel engine, usually of the new Cleveland design, put out 250 horses with a single exhaust, while a 4-barrel car with dual exhaust was seen on the 300-horse Clevelands. A 3-speed manual transmission was still standard fare. Underneath, these cars also featured the same cross-country suspension of its Cyclone brethren. Tires were the F7014 raised white letter type mounted on 6-inch wide wheels. The exterior featured a beautifully styled hidden headlamp grille with the Cyclone-only running lights, body-color dual racing mirrors, and two-tone paint, with the lower body below the full-length moldings painted black. The back tail lamp panel was also blacked out and used 3-pod tail lamp assemblies. Inside, these GTs had high-back bucket seats and a sporty rim-below steering wheel. Finally, the Cyclone Spoiler. Standard equipment for this model included a 370-horse 429 Cobra Jet engine with a functional ram air assembly atop a Rochester 715 CFM carb. A Hurst-shifted 4-speed top loader sends the power to a 350-geared traction-lock 9-inch rear axle. Naturally, these cars were equipped with a cross-country suspension utilizing G7014 raised white letter tires. Its name is Spoiler, so as you'd expect, functional front and rear spoilers adorn this aggressive-looking Mercury. The front was black and the rear was painted body color. There were only 6 color choices. 5 were the bright competition colors. Ford called these same colors Grabber for their muscle cars. Buyers could get blue, gold, green, orange, and yellow. The only non-competition color was pastel blue. Dual racing mirrors were painted body color, and the special running lights in the grille were quite distinctive. A prominent stripe package in a complementary color was also included. The tail lamp panel was blacked out and used 3-pod tail lamp assemblies. Inside, standard equipment was a rim-below steering wheel, high-back bucket seats, and the instrumentation group, which included a 140 mph speedometer, an 8,000 RPM tachometer, an engine temperature, oil pressure, and an ammeter gauge, all integrated into the passenger side of the dash pad, angled facing the driver. An interesting side note here is about the one car that was highly modified by the NASCAR shop of Holman Moody in North Carolina. They adapted an aerodynamic fiberglass front nose cone to a standard spoiler, but never fully developed the program. Several Torino Cobras that year were also similarly modified. They were called King Cobras, and they suffered the same fate as the Mercury. The spoiler and a few of the Torinos survive today. Throughout the Mercury midsize lineup for 1970, a huge list of options could be ordered. Cars equipped with the drag pack option, which makes it a super Cobra jet, were certainly at the top of the heap. With or without ram air, horsepower only increased by 5 to 375. Air conditioning was not available with this package. The SCJ got a 780 CFM Holley carb, heavier duty engine internals, a mechanical camshaft, an external engine oil cooler, and a rear axle with a 391 gear and a 31 spline traction lock unit. The Super Drag Pack cars got all the same upgrades, but an even steeper 430 gear with a Detroit locker. The 1970 Montego lineup consisted of 13 models. A total of 103,873 cars found new homes for this year. 1971. This year, there were still 3 Cyclone models, but were now known as the Mercury Montego Cyclone, the Mercury Montego Cyclone GT, and the Mercury Montego Cyclone Spoiler. While the model choices carried over for 1970, the details of each changed dramatically. However, the wheelbase remained the same at 117 inches, and the cars looked very similar, with only the usual minor changes. It's obvious that in just 1 year, Ford was very concerned about continuing government regulations, and fuel economy was now something else to be considered. The 429 Cobra jet was still available with or without ram air and still rated at 370 horses, but the drag pack option was now exclusive to the Mustang. However, this year, all CJs had 4-bolt main blocks like the previous year's drag pack blocks had. The new suspension package, which debuted last year, carried on into 1971. The Mercury Montego Cyclone was now standard with Ford's excellent performing 351 Cleveland engine with a 4-barrel carburetor. Next up the ladder was the Mercury Montego Cyclone GT. In addition to the same aggressive hood seen on the base model, these cars had a concealed headlamp grille with a larger gun sight center sporting a GT emblem and special running lights on opposite ends of the center, dual racing mirrors, and deluxe wheel covers. This model featured 2-tone paint schemes like their 1970 counterparts, achieved again by using black paint below the side trim. Black was also used on the rear panel that now had 3-pod tail lamp assemblies. When opening that muscular-looking hood, you'd see a standard 351 2-barrel engine, most likely a Cleveland-built example backed by a 3-speed automatic. Power front disc brakes were also found. G78 14 whitewall tires were standard, although a buyer could opt for F70 14s at no additional cost. Inside, high-back bucket seats, full instrumentation, and a sporty rim-blow steering wheel made any driver feel right at home. Of course, with a huge option list and several other engines available, most cars were updated from their standard specs. This brings us to the Mercury Montego Cyclone Spoiler. Under that awesome performance hood with the simulated scoop was a 351 Cleveland sporting a 4-barrel carb. Behind it was a Hurst-shifted top loader transmitting the power to a 325 geared 9-inch axle with traction lock. Raised white letter G70 14 tires mounted on 6-inch wide steel wheels, sporting caps and trim rings, contact the road, and the cross-country suspension package smooths out any road that this awesome car travels. On the exterior, these beauties had limited color choices in competition blue, gold, green, orange, and yellow, plus bright red and pastel blue. Body-colored dual racing mirrors were still used. The grille features a pair of styled running lights, and the stripes were slightly revised from last year. Rear spoilers were now painted black to match the 3-pod tail lamp panel and the front spoiler. Inside, they were equipped with the high-back bucket seats, full instrumentation, and the rim-blow steering wheel. In summation, the Montego was available in 12 models and tallied a dire 57,094 cars in total. For 1972, the Mercury Montego was fully redesigned with a new body and full-frame construction, abandoning a unibody platform that worked so well for them back to 1960. Suspensions were now sprung by front and rear coil springs. Two-door models now had a wheelbase of 114 inches. 9 models comprised the midsize Mercury offerings this year, with a total 135,092 cars sold, a vast improvement over the previous year. The Cyclone was reverted to a performance option package available only on the two-door Mercury Montego, the Montego MX, and the Montego GT. This exciting package included one of 2 engines, either the Q-code 4-bolt main 351 Cleveland Cobra-Jet engine, rated at 248 horsepower, or the N-code 429 4-barrel, rated at 205 horsepower. Both used dual exhaust. These were now SAE net horsepower ratings, which was always lower than the gross horsepower system used before, but it's the system that all manufacturers were now required to use. The Cyclone option group included a functional ram air induction getting cooler outside air through a pair of integrated hood scoops for either engine. Wheel covers and trim rings were seen on 6-inch stamped steel wheels, mounting either F7014 performance tires for the 351 cars or G7014 performance tires for the 429 cars. Additional external styling cues included special body stripes and identification and body-colored dual racing mirrors. Under the cars, a traction lock differential put the power to the ground, and a heavy-duty suspension dampens the ride. A power front disc rear drum brake system handled the stopping. Transmission availability for the 351 cars was either a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic, while the 429 cars were only sold with an automatic. Inside, the package included high-back bucket seats and a rim-blow steering wheel. Naturally, a huge choice of other options were available. Early Mercury factory literature showed this performance option being available, while later publications no longer had any information on this package. Supposedly, a mere 30 packaged cars were produced for 1972, with 29 Montego GTs built and only one Montego MX. 2/3 of these cars were equipped with the 429. Man, I'd sure love to find one of those. The Cyclone models would now be relegated to the annals of automotive history, and well over half a century later are commanding much interest and in some cases big money from collectors. Long live the Mercury brand and all of the Cyclone models. Well, that concludes our look back on the Mercury Cyclones.